Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. We're going to do a fun little list here. As some of you may remember, we will link it down there in the description. I did a video a little while ago where I talked about the 10 worst songs of my adolescence. The response was so overwhelming with other terrible songs, it just seemed like a good idea to revisit the whole concept and do a 10 worst songs of my adolescence part 2. Some of these I liked, some of these I never liked. I will not admit which one is which, but what I will tell you is the first to kick off this fantastic list of musical winners is Stains. It's Been a While. One of the most needlessly angsty rock songs of the 2000s, and it is unquestionably Stains' most tedious single. It's been a while, it's been a while, it's been a while, been a while. This vocal line, this lyric is sung so many times throughout this track, it's really difficult to think of any other lyric or bring any other lyric to mind. But when one does, you get gem-encrusted word smithery like, why must I feel this way? Just make this go away. It's like all the melodrama of radio metal in the 2000s, Super Saiyan charged with expensive coffee and cigarettes. Not to mention this song features a vocal style that would go on to influence many a local bar band. But as wonderful as this song is, we can't dwell on it all day, which is why we're going to move on to Coal Chamber with Shock the Monkey. When nu metal and alternative metal hit and just hit this peak of craze, Stained definitely saw quite a bit of kickback from that, as did Coal Chamber. They were one of the harder, gruffer, more aggressive bands in this trend. And even though a lot of people crap on nu metal, they say it's terrible, they say Mudvayne's awful, get Korn out of here. You can put down these bands, but very few groups in nu metal have the bragging rights of getting an Ozzy Osbourne feature on their record, and that's exactly what happens on here. If you didn't already know from the title of this track, Shock the Monkey is in fact a Peter Gabriel cover. So we have Ozzy on a Peter Gabriel cover, and it's an alternative metal version of that song. It's like all the awkwardness of famous 70s musicians trying to translate into the 80s times 10. There was just something about these nu metal groups. They saw something in new wave music. You had Disturbed covering Shout. You also had Orgy with Blue Monday. That was their biggest single ever. But even those tracks are marginally listenable. This Coal Chamber rendition of Shock the Monkey is barely tolerable, especially with Ozzy bringing maybe the most inappropriate vocal accompaniment for this song. And you know you gotta shock the monkey. Hey, hey! Even upon first listening, couldn't figure out whether or not this song felt more menacing or more hilarious. However, it could never be as hilarious as our next track here, Saliva's Click Boom. This is just another instance of really bad rap rock. Even groups that didn't necessarily have rapping throughout all of their rock-flavored songs at least had, just a little bit, It was just such a popular fusion on the radio and on MTV at the time. Everybody was dabbling in it. You can mostly thank Limp Bizkit for that. And we will not be featuring them on this list, actually, mostly because I think this song is sort of even inferior to some of their worst material. Imagine Limp Bizkit as being like a terrible nuclear power plant, and Saliva is just like the runoff that streams down the river as a result. And this is true from everything in the jump the fuck up riffs, but now, to the lyrics on this thing. My mom and dad were perfect, but you don't hear no crying ass bitching from me like it seems to be on everybody's CD. There's a lot of funny lyrics on this track about being on the radio and getting popular and opening your mind. However, that sensation is felt much more strongly with this next track, Aaron Carter's I Want Candy. Aaron Carter is kind of like America's first attempt at Justin Bieber. In the late 90s, in the early 2000s, there was a boy band craze like the world has never, ever, ever seen. Some of you guys are freaking out about One Direction right now and about how terrible they are. And boy bands now, they're not as big as they used to be. You could not get away from them. We had the Backstreet Boys. We had NSYNC. We had 98 Degrees. LFO, who I mentioned in the last video. Oh my god. Apparently, LFO, I didn't even know this. It stands for Light Funky Ones. We had Five. They were all bad boys. And Dream Street. We had a boy band made before our very eyes on a TV show. Their name was O-Town. You can look at live videos of them singing on the internet. They were awful, and we liked them anyway. You can be my liquid dreams. Around the same time, we had the second coming of the New Kids on the Block, who were putting out solo records that were on the charts. Jordan Knight and Joey McIntyre. All of this was just not enough. What we had to do was get the younger brother of one of the Backstreet Boys, Nick Carter, and give him a record contract. And on his big breakout record, not only are there amazing songs on there like My Internet Girl, any girl that you're trying to hit on over the internet, send her that track, she'll just fall in love with you. But the song I vividly remember, being younger and not being able to get away from, was Aaron's cover of the 1965's Strangelove's hit, I Want Candy. A song that hilariously starts off with Aaron on the phone talking to one of his bros, being like, hey man, can't come out tonight. I want to go see this girl. Her name's Candy. She's awesome. The instrumental rendition of this track is just completely gutless. It continues to strip out the jungle drums of the original track and even further distances the song away from the Bo Diddley beat that this track was originally built on. The song was just corny on impact. It's only gotten worse with age, and not only that, but Aaron Carter, with this track and his debut album as well, actually precede the whole Kids Bop thing, the Kids Bop concept. I actually think this album, this artist was the archetype for Kids Bop. Maybe if somebody grabs a time machine, they can go back in time, Terminator style, and help Aaron Carter go into chemical engineering, because we do not advocate murder on this channel. Next, No Mercy. Where do you go? These guys are a Florida pop trio. This was their huge, big breakout single. And this track was basically your favorite song if you were these guys. Not only is it kind of disappointing to hear that someone who has the name No Mercy is not a badass metal band. No, rather they're coming out with terrible Latin music flavored eurodance with a cheesy house beat, some bland reverb, cliche synth stabs, and a really just corny acoustic guitar lead. And the song incessantly asks, where do you go? Whenever this song is playing in the other room is the answer for me. And if somebody walks out with you, that person is a keeper. Next, rapman, Nelly, with the song Batter Up. One of his earlier singles, one of his more terrible singles. Nelly, Southern rapper, part of Saint Lunatics, who are actually featured on this song. A guy whose visual gimmick was having a Band-Aid on his face. Here we go. Yeah. Let me paint a historical picture for you. In the hip-hop was totally tired of its street cred and being hardcore, and decided that instead it was going to hand us a bunch of mainstream-friendly pop rappers that looked like kittens in comparison to the artists who were making great hip-hop music before them. Not only does this track feature a horribly dinky beat that gets old even a minute into the song, but the track has a hook that gets even older. Batter up! Lots of very tacky flows all over this thing. Nelly delivers an awful verse where he is talking about licking it, sticking it. Did I say licking it? Yeah, licking it. Lots of bad baseball metaphors and just some generally vapid verses. Moving on to our buddies, Canadian pop rock outfit, the Barenaked Ladies, with a track that maybe has one of the most iconic intros of a radio rock song from this era. It's been. The Barenaked Ladies, their first big breakout single, 1 Week, a track that sounds like it was focus group by bringing together a bunch of 90s kids who were incessantly bullied out of their lunch money every day at school. And just that riff. Bam, bam, now, now. This song is just a party for people who wear their pants too high. But even the music video itself, oh my God, it's so awkward. Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken, you have a drumstick and your brain stops sticking. You know, the verses, the rap verses on this track, it's really like a can of worms in and of itself. It's a Pandora's box of pain that I am not sure I'm willing to open, because if I do, it's really going to be like we're kicking off Maze Runner right here. It's going to be a labyrinth of evil from which this video will never escape. So we're going to continue on to the Offspring's Get a Job. These guys were, at one time, actually a pretty great punk and alternative rock band. They have the bragging rights of saying they have the biggest selling independent album of all time, Smash. This album sold tons of copies when it came out on Epitaph in the 90s. But instead of continuing on with this winning punk alt-rock formula, Offspring went on to write some of the worst pop rock of the late 90s. They started writing really tacky, commercial-friendly singles like Pretty Fly for a White Guy. Maybe the most obnoxious single to come off of this record of Offspring's is Get a Job. It's like some really bad ska pop rock with steel drums, a completely intolerable chorus, say no way, Not only this, but the chords and the structure and the melody of this track seems like it was all written in a really long studio session where every member of the band listened to the Beatles song Obla Dee Obla Da over and over and over and over. And there are these really silly, patronizing, overly simplistic stories of significant others being lazy and not having a job. It's just so like, blah, blah, blah. Here are all these things you can relate to. Here are all these sweet, catchy, straightforward things. Don't you like this song? No. I don't like this song. However, I might like it just a little bit more than this next track. Sum 41's Fat Lip. Not only were the 2000s a pretty terrible time for hip-hop in the mainstream, but it was also a pretty terrible time for punk in the mainstream. Absolutely, there were some iconic groups to come out of this time period who really defined pop punk in the mainstream in a pretty positive way, like Blink-182, as well as Green Day, but still, even with these bands, they were sort of reducing punk down to just pop rock with hair dye and piercings. And nowhere is this lack of true punk spirit and ethos more than on this Sum 41 single, Fat Lip. Especially with all the anti-conformity lyrics on this track. Been another casualty of society. And once we glide out of these super punk choruses, we have rap rock verses. Yes, they're here too! Because what's more punk and anti-conformity than doing what everyone else is doing? And we're gonna finish this list off, really polish it off, give it a nice buff, a nice sheen, with the Godsmack song, Dun Dun, Bam 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 Dun Dun, Dun Dun. I could have talked about that song that appears in all the Army commercials on this video, or even Voodoo. Awful track. But really, we had to talk about the song that got Godsmack where they are today. No, I'm not talking about Down in a Hole, because that's an Alice in Chains song. We're talking about Godsmack. Don't get them mixed up. One rips off the other, not the other way around. No, I'm talking about the song Whatever, a track that hilariously stayed popular, even though the message of the song is go away. Fucking go away. For sure, this track does, I think, have one of the better and more listenable and earworm guitar riffs of any alternative metal song coming out in this era, but the track is so redundant. I'm doing the best I ever did. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing the best I ever did. Okay, we get it. You are trying your best. But if you are, why is the song so terrible? Especially when we get down into the lyrics of the verses here. You are my pet all the time. You get what you get until you're through with my down. Say what you will about ska stap, but I find the vocals on Godsmack's records to be so much more excruciating. And those are 10 more tracks that were some of the worst tracks of my adolescence. Let me know what were some of the worst songs of your adolescence. Genre don't matter. Share your mind, share your opinions, share your preferences, and I hope you have a nice day. Anthony Fantano, worst music, adolescence, forever.